Hey everyone, welcome back to the Real Estate 101 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Robert Leonard, and today we're joined by Cory Jacobson and Ryan Bevilacqua. Guys, welcome to the show.
Robert, thanks for having us, man. We're super excited to be here.
Let's do this, man.
Usually when we have two guests on the show, I like to very quickly just let each person kind of introduce themselves so that we know who is talking. You don't have to necessarily give us your background, but just say, hey, I'm Ryan, I'm Cory, so people know throughout the conversation who is who.
Yeah, I'm Cory. So, Rob, it's good to see you again, man. I know we've done a couple interviews on our podcast, but good to be here.
This is Ryan. It's good to flip the script, like he said. And I'm glad to be on the other end, man. Fire away at us.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to join the guys on their show, the Weekly Juice. So I'll be sure to put a link to both of those episodes in the show notes for anybody that's interested in checking those out and hearing me as a guest. I want to start by talking about where your guys' money and investing journey started. Was money and investing openly discussed at family dinners for you, or was it a bit more of a taboo subject and you kind of just stumbled into it yourself?
I guess I can go first here. This is an interesting one because I come from a family of entrepreneurs, but as you know, and probably a lot of your audience members know, there's a big difference between an investor and savvy with money and being an entrepreneur. In fact, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that don't know a lot about money or how to handle money because they're really good at their craft and their trade, so they can they can do a really good job with their business, but maybe not actually create wealth doing so. And that's kind of a little bit about what happened with my family. I actually work for my family's business, and my father and my uncle are the owners, and they're extremely good at what they do. But money and investing was never something that we really talked about growing up. It was something that I kind of learned just on my own and on my own path. So it wasn't something that I grew up having a lot of knowledge on. Kind of as I hit my mid-20s, it was something that really I was able to figure this out with this guy.
Yeah, actually, I kind of have a similar story. So my dad, his brother, he actually has two brothers. So all three of them are entrepreneurs and they have their own companies, but on the blue collar side. So one's in construction, paving, craning, and it's like I said, blue collar. And money was really rarely discussed at our dinner tables. And it kind of took self-education and going through the process on my own to figure it out and how we can. I knew at some point I was going to be an entrepreneur, right? It's just in my blood. It's clearly all the men in my family that they've done that. So I was like, at some point I'm going to have something of my own. And my dad said at a young age, he's like, you always want to be the guy that's essentially working for yourself and paying yourself. And because you're going to feel restricted and there's going to be a ceiling, whether you go corporate or some other route. So I always knew it was in me, but I didn't know when it would come out, what age. He was about 29 when he started his company. And it's odd, but 29 is kind of right when it hit. Cory and I were like, dude, we got to do this thing and just start building our own future. But when it comes to kicking back to your question about talking about money, it wasn't a thing at all. Investing, it's just kind of here's I want you to go to college. And because my dad never went to college, and he said, here, I'm going to pave the way. I'm going to put you into college and you're going to get the education. Little did I know, going through college is, for me, I learned it was all about the experiences, right? It wasn't so much the classes and the things I learned in there. It was meeting different people, networking, and going through college didn't totally set me up for financial success. It took the self-education after college and doing the research and networking with people in the industry or in the FI community that really got me going to a path of my own success. So it's just very interesting what you think that someone coming from a family of entrepreneurs or people that are successful, they know what they're doing with their money and or they talk about it, and it's not so often that they do.
That distinction between being an entrepreneur and being good with your money hits home for me because my dad has been an entrepreneur nearly my whole life. I believe he worked a regular corporate job in the blue collar field before I was born, but ever since then he's just been his own business. He's run his own business, but he's not necessarily specifically good with money. He's not an investor. He doesn't do necessarily anything with it. So I think too often people think just because you're an entrepreneur or even a successful entrepreneur that you're also a great investor or great with personal finances. And that's not always the case.
No, it's definitely not. And I think one of the points to mention here is that, wow, actually I just blacked out, lost my train of thought. No, but I agree with you, Robert. I think there's actually a huge distinction between somebody who's good with their money and somebody who's an entrepreneur. In fact, there's a ton of people in our space that work 9 to 5 jobs and have that security and then use their extra 5 to 9, if you will, to build their side hustles on the side to a point where they can get it to a sustainable position to be able to leave their job, and they actually may use that security and be better with money than the entrepreneur who's running around doing all the tasks and has no time to think about what they're doing with their money, making it work for themselves when all they're doing is trying to run their own business.
Yeah, there's such a rabbit hole you can go down here, and I'm just thinking about I've talked to people now that we've interviewed so many people, and I start to kind of parlay these questions into my inner circle, right? And you're going out to dinner, or you're at family parties, and you see successful people, you start like asking them questions a little bit. And recently I've come across a pretty successful person in our circle. And I was kind of asking him questions just about his finances and like how he set everything up. And he's like, I don't know, I just pay a guy. And I'm like, it kind of blew my mind where it's like, I tried talking about mutual funds and index funds and ETFs. And he's like, I don't know. I give someone, I get a check at the end of the year, or like a dividends. Right. And so it kind of blew my mind. I like to be in the weeds a little bit more. And I have a financial planner, but I also have my own money management, or I manage my own funds in a separate entity, just because I like to play with it. It's more of a game, not really a gamble, because I've done a lot of research at this point, but I don't like just passing off all of my money, right, my financial future into someone else's hands that I don't even know truly how successful that person is. So it's an interesting debate going back and forth, whether you should do it yourself, DIY, or pass it off.
Not to say that this is always the case, but what I've seen from a lot of entrepreneurs, that if they're investing, a lot of times they do hire an advisor, typically the 1% kind of annual assets under management type of financial advisor, not just they don't know any better. So that's just kind of the route that they go.
Yeah.
When you guys decided to go down the rabbit hole of self-education, you probably found that there are a lot of different ways to achieve financial independence and become wealthy. In the FIRE community, there's a lot of people who choose to forego real estate and just invest heavily in the stock market. Why did you guys choose to make real estate a big part of your strategy?
I can start here first because I originally started off with the house hacking strategy. And when I was 25 years old, I was working for actually the Philadelphia 76ers. And I realized that my paychecks were money in, and at the end of the month, I was pretty much breaking even. And a mentor came to me and he was like, hey, a way that you can subsidize some of your living is if you buy a 2-unit property or buy a 3 or 4 bedroom property, live in either one of the units or one of the rooms and rent out the other. And once I did that, I had a mentality shift that I was like, oh, I actually want to create this spread between my income and my expenses. So I bought a 3-bedroom property and I rented out 2 rooms and I lived for free. I wasn't able to make money, but that, $700 plus utilities, so $1,000 expense that I was spending, I was able to wipe that out and live for free. And then that was my first introduction to real estate. I wasn't really a real estate investor yet, but I understood the concept. So then I was thinking, wait a second, if I don't live in these properties, I can run the numbers correctly and bring in cash flow every single month. Not only the cash flow, but the appreciation eventual of the property that builds long-term wealth, the tax benefits that you get, and then you're paying down your loan in the same sense so that you can either refinance in the future or pull money out as a home equity line of credit or something to buy more properties. And then I figured, if I had enough of these properties, I actually wouldn't have to show up to work. I wouldn't have to trade my time for money anymore. And so Rye and I, we realized that we're kind of on the same path. We started to buy real estate together, and we're on this journey towards, okay, I understand that I can potentially build a stock portfolio, but it doesn't pay me every single month to eventually be able to alleviate the need to go to a job every day.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. We always talk about financial independence, and like you can put a number on it, right? It's like 25 times your annual expenses and you reach your FI number, right? So $60,000, you need $1.5 million invested. And then with the 4% rule, the drawback, you'll be able to pay yourself $60,000 a year. So to translate that over to real estate, there's also a way to compute it. When Cory and I, when we got together, we're like, wow, we can find a X amount of properties that we'll need, and then we'll reach our fine number, and then you're work optional at that point. So for example, if you run the numbers and you find a property that cash flows for $500 a month, you need 10 properties to be financially independent if you have $60,000 worth of annual expenses. So just to run the numbers, that's $500 a month times 10 properties, it's $5,000 times 12 months, then you get your 60,000 number. So that's just like the bare bones even. If my annual expenses are 60K and I have 10 properties that are paying me 60K, I'm at like dead even, right? And then anything else is icing on the cake. So then you can use your W-2 income, right? You can live off that for your lifestyle, or you buy more properties, right? We typically would advise probably 12 to 15 properties at that $500 a month in cash flow, just so that way you have more of a cushion, right? You're not just at your break even point. And that's what that $60,000 example, but I love that. It's something tangible for me, right? Like I know 10 properties at the $500 a month in cash flow, I'm good. And we love real estate also because it's tangible, right? It's something you can go and transform and increase. You can force appreciation by doing a number of things in the property over time to help that go up in value and increase the rent over time. So we love it. And I don't know, just it's hands-on.
Proven.
You mentioned the 10 properties you mentioned at 500 a piece. That's going to get you to your fire number. The traditional sense when fire was created, that is fire. What I think is interesting that's come about, I don't know if it's, I don't think it started when fire first originated, but over the last few years, there's been a couple different deviations of fire, like fat fire. And so that might be 20 properties because you don't want to live you're putting in all this work, right? You don't want to live just how you have been forever. You want to live a little bit better. And so that's what some would consider fat fire. And so there's different kind of levels of fire as well as just the traditional fire sense.
Totally. There's fat fire, coast fire, lean fire, traditional fire. There's a lot of things. And it's evolving, right? This whole little like cult community of the fire movement, right? It's awesome. It's cool. You get everyone's different opinions, right? There's some people that are extremely frugal and they trim out all their expenses and live very, very frugally, and they'll reach fire way faster. Then there's others, if you go the fat fire route, they just want a ton of cash flow coming in so they can live the lifestyle they want, have the big house, multiple cars. So it's just interesting to go back and forth and hear the stories of everybody and what their fire, I guess, identity is, right?
Of all of those options, which kind of identity do you guys typically tend to fall more with?
It's funny you asked this, Robert, because we have recently been talking to a number of entrepreneurs and just trying to figure out where we fit in this space and what the ideal lifestyle for us would be like. Obviously, we mentioned that, $60,000 number per year. And I think that's each of our baselines for financial freedom. But I forget what YouTube video we were watching where it said $20,000 a month. If you can bring in $20,000 a month, that is that point where your lifestyle you start to be able to do the things that I think that we both want to do. And that is be work optional, take the vacations, take our families to new places, explore the world, and then, have some nice things. So that is the number that I think if we can bring it in and within passive income in that structure, and I think that's the route we want to go. And that might be, I guess,
that's fat fire.
That's a beast fire, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely fat fire. I mean, it goes in stages, right? So I'd like to hit, we're on pace to hit traditional fire too, right? So that's where you want to get first. So once we get that 60K each year, it's like, okay, now let's just ramp it up and get to fat fire, because that's, as Cory mentioned, where you can truly feel autonomous and feel the freedoms of your time freedom, their location freedom. And if we'll be able to work wherever we want, right? If we just keep accumulating these properties, I'd love to pop open the laptop, be in Dominican and just chilling on the beach, have the kids running around, hanging out. And I'm like, yeah, just managing a couple calls from the property manager or finding another avenue to increase my income, right? That's what we love doing right now, is we're like exploring other options outside of real estate as well, just to bump up that income. And there's so many fun options out there, but you truly need a lot. It takes money to make money, right? So to even be comfortable to explore other options and have your risk tolerance go up, you have to have that baseline, and that's where real estate comes in for us.
Yeah, and the best part about this, Robert, is that we found that it actually gets easier. The hardest part is for us was the first 2 years. We're like in year 4 together, working together on this. But the first 2 years where you're starting to get your first couple properties under your belt, those start to compound. They appreciate in value, if you're in a solid market, and then you're able to use those properties to buy additional properties and expand your portfolio by having different layers and different income strategies. So the hardest part is trying to figure out your niche. And then once you figure out your niche, you take step 1 and 2, and then actually steps 3, 4, and 5 have become a little bit easier. Not because they're actually easier, but because we're better.
Yeah, I talk about that kind of frequently because for me, it was a slog to get that first rental property. And then I was able to burr my second one, and I got into that for $0 down, and I had like, say, $15,000 in equity. I put $15,000 into my first property. And so I essentially, in theory, got those for zero. I got 2 rental properties for $0. But that first one was really, really hard. And then once you get past that, next thing you know, you're buying multiple properties, leveraging the equity in previous properties, and it just becomes significantly easier.
Yeah, a lot of investors that we talk to, real estate investors, talk about a seasoning period, and we've been fortunate enough to invest in a real estate market that has not had a crash, right? I started in 2018. It's been pretty good on the appreciation side since then. That's why we run our numbers to make sure that the cash flow pays for the property, whether or not the actual value of the property goes up or down. But I think that there's a seasoning period, that 18 months to 2 years, where your property can appreciate at a point to where you're paying your loan down enough to say that's when you can play with the money that's inside the property, that's your equity. And what we're doing right now is we're taking out home equity lines of credit on our personal residences to go buy rental properties out of state. And that's that point that we're talking about, that we get to where you got to get the first one before you can get the second. And then the second one can kind of spill into the third. And as you do that, you have a lot more options.
What was the transition like for you guys we'll get into the exact specifics of kind of what your first strategy was and kind of how you went from there. But I'm curious, what was the timeline like from your first property to your second? And I'm asking because I bought my first traditional rental, and then I think I waited maybe a year or so before I even bought, maybe 2 years before I bought a second one. And then I bought 3 in 1 month. So it was kind of like a weird scaling timeline.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I bought my first property in 2018, and then I bought a duplex by myself. So first of all, let me back up. It took me about 2 years to save up the money that I needed to buy that first property. It was an FHA loan. I only put 5% down, but I wanted to live in an area that, it costed me $25,000 out of pocket, or maybe it was a little bit less, $20,000 out of pocket. It took me 2 years to save up. 18 months later, that's only 75% of that time, I bought a duplex. Okay. And then 9 months after that, we bought a duplex together. And then 6 months after that, we bought another one. And then now we're getting ready to go purchase properties out of state just 4 months after that. So that is kind of the period between where our cash flow is starting to roll into other properties, and we haven't spent a dime of it. It's just helping to build our business up so that we can now go buy properties within our LLCs, and banks look at us and say, oh, these guys, they've started to build a real portfolio for themselves. And I imagine that 4 months will turn into 2 months, which will turn into, hopefully we're buying properties every month if we have enough income coming in to support it.
I know you guys are both into real estate and stock investing. What I've found, though, is that a lot of real estate investors actually look down on stock investing or talk badly about it. Or if you listen to a lot of real estate shows, they just say that real estate's the only asset class. Why do you guys think that is?
Ooh, that's interesting.
We're not like that. Yeah, so I don't know.
And I'm not either. Just for the record, I'm not either. That's why I'm curious why you think other people might be.
So I can take a stab here. So we were talking to someone the other day about this, and it's very interesting. It takes a lot of work to get to find a property, analyze deals, win the deal, right? Like get it under contract. And then you have to start managing it, whether it's you personally I'm talking about long-term rentals, right? So that's either you managing it or you're hiring a property manager. That is so much to do and so many different steps in building out a team, where some people rather just go completely passive and say, hey, listen, I have a lump sum of $50K, rather than going in and putting 20% down on a property. I'm just going to dump that into the stocks that I feel like are going to go up. You could make the argument last year, it was like between 20 and 30%. I think the S&P went up. So it was a crazy year for it. And if you could make the argument that, hey, like that's going to continue to rise and I don't have to touch anything of the property. I don't have to deal with any of the extra BS. I'm just going to let it ride and keep going. And so that's why I think people may argue stocks are easier. For me, I don't like throwing darts when it's okay, could I pick the next Tesla, Amazon, Facebook? I don't know that I could pick that. So we do stock invest, but it's more the index fund route. And specifically, there's a book that I love and I recommend for beginners. It's The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. And he talks about essentially like a 3-fund approach where you pick the total U.S. stock market, the total international stock market, and the total U.S. bond market, and just change your asset allocation over time the way essentially based on your risk tolerance, right? So like when you're younger, you have it more so in the VT SAX, which is the U.S. stock market. And it's an index fund that covers the whole market, right, in these different sectors. And that's not like me picking one stock, hoping that it goes up, because if it doesn't, then I'm screwed, right? And it could go down a ton of value. So I'm more of an index fund kind of guy.
Yeah, Robert, but to answer your question, like on a more granular level, I think people are just generally proud of what they do in their own niche. And I know real estate investors, we know what the behind the scenes are like, and it's not always pretty. So maybe it's just because they feel like what they do and the what they've created is I don't know if it's an egotistical thing, but they just think it's better. But what we've learned is that the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. So what we want to do is not diversify too much, but if the real estate market takes a crash, there's a lot of people looking at it kind of laughing like, see, I told you so. So we want to have enough buckets where we're having and buying enough income producing assets. Real estate just happens to be what covers probably 75 or 80% of what we do. But as Ryan mentioned, we do index funds. We invest in our 401k just because it's there from our W-2 employer. So, and we're adding other streams of income so that we can hopefully, if one or two of these legs on the table, so to speak, get kicked out, we still have other legs to stand on.
An interesting kind of question or challenge that I was posed with recently from somebody that I think is well-educated and well-intentioned but doesn't necessarily know a lot about real estate. They come from more of a traditional academic stock investing background, and they're trying to learn more about real estate. But they asked me, if you had money to invest, and you can only do one thing, would you put it into a retirement account, whether it be a Roth IRA, 401k, something along those lines? Or would you put it into real estate? And I know what I've been doing over the last few years, and I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts and approach would be to something like that.
Sure. What's the sum of money?
Obviously, that's a big variable, but let's just say it's really any sum. I know obviously there's limits to your IRA. So if it's more than that, you could do both. But let's just say you could do either one, but you can only do one.
I think it's just common. Like the main common thing for people is like when they first get their job, right? It's like you invest in your 401k and you automatically go up to the employer match. Then you open the Roth IRA it's a $6,000 max for 2022. And you go that route, right? Because it's a tax advantage account. However, I think the earlier you can get into real estate, the better, because it's going to generate you, if you run your numbers right and you find the right property, you could start a house hack, right? Where you subsidize your housing. And then also say you have a duplex, right? Cory's done this. He could probably explain this better than me, but essentially buy a duplex, live in one unit, then you have a tenant live in the other unit, and they pay down your mortgage. And if you ran your numbers properly, you might even have a little left over of cash flow per month. You could take that cash flow and start investing it however you like, whether you want to dump that into your IRA or you just want to save it, right, and build up your emergency fund. So there's like a lot of different ways. I would say my real estate's continually gone up over time, and if you can start somewhere, I would definitely go the real estate route.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. I think for me, it comes down to control. And what I know about stock investing is that I am not a CEO in any of these boardrooms. So I don't make the decisions. So to know if a stock is going to go up or down by whatever percentage, I am extremely hands off. we're type A guys. We think that real estate gives you the control. What area are you going to buy in? You have the decision-making power that you watch a path of progress in a city and it may go up and say, I want to plant my flag here. And I think the control aspect of saying, ooh, I bought a property for $200,000, but I put $60,000 worth of work into it, and now it's worth $340,000. You can control the asset. So my vote would always be real estate, but that doesn't mean that with the proceeds of my real estate, I wouldn't be then turning and investing into the market. And I'll just give you one example. This is an example that Ryan and I probably will never get to see, and it's rare that an investor does get to see this. But we know somebody personally who bought commercial buildings in Soho in 1960 for $70,000. He sold them in 2013. And if you want to take a guess what he sold them for, you're not going to create that type of leverage in the stock market and come out with, I'll just tell you, $13 million, at that point. So that is why the answer would always be real estate. And for me, that doesn't mean that we have the knowledge base to find those types of properties, but it's the power behind it is really what excites us.
I think I completely agree, but it's even more than just the amount, because like you said, that Soho example is a great example, but it's kind of a outlier. You could also argue that you bought Amazon in the 90s, right?
Totally.
Or 2000, right? And the stock market does really well. So I think what a lot of people miss is that they think that the stock market appreciates much more than real estate, which is on average probably true. But the difference here is that you have somebody paying off your property. So you might put $15,000 or $20,000 into a property that's, if you house hack it, you could buy something worth, say, $400,000, $500,000. Now, in 20 years, you only put $20,000 into something and it's worth paid off $500,000. Turning $20,000 into $500,000 in the stock market is probably not going to happen over a 20-year period.
Exactly. And what we always like to say is that we're not, after we make our initial investment, as long as the numbers are ran right and you're cash flowing properly, you're not actually the one that's paying for the repairs, paying for the capital improvements. Your tenants are doing that, and then also giving you cash flow in addition to it. So that would be the reason why we advocate heavily towards real estate. And yeah, it can be a smaller amount, and you can also go the dividend route. I would say that if you want to be completely hands off and 100% passive, and you have enough money to make yourself a difference, stock investing might be for you. We would never knock it. We just know that real estate is, I would suggest, for our tolerance level, real estate's the way that we would start off.
Yeah, I'm not knocking stock investing either at all. I'm a big stock investor. I put a lot of money into the stock market, and I spent 8 to 10 years studying stock investing before I even got into real estate. So I do love it. I just think that there's this interesting dynamic of people who are in real estate that think that you should have no money in the stock market just because real estate's an option. But Ryan, you mentioned JL Collins, and for anybody that's interested in hearing more from JL, I love JL's book. I actually just recently reread it. Had him on the show not too long ago, so you can go back and find that episode. But other than that one book, what other resources or material have you guys leveraged and leaned on to teach you everything that you guys know?
Sure. There's a lot. So I could fire off a million different books to you. Actually, I'll give a little plug here. We actually have all our recommended books on Instagram. So it's at Weekly Juice Pod. You click the link in our bio, and we have a whole Amazon store of our favorite books based on financial independence, mentality, and then also real estate. So you have a cluster there, but I'll go through a couple. The first one we read that really set our mind off is the one that you've heard a million times, but it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's like a mentality one where it's like, it just changes your mindset to become an investor versus a consumer. And I love that. And it taught us about real estate and how cash flow can help, set you off to freedom. So that's that one. Then we also read Retire Early with Real Estate by Chad Carson.
I was going to go there. Yeah.
That's his guy. Chad's the man. He has such an excellent way of relating his story and real estate to the average person, right? And he has amazing YouTube videos online where he takes his little whiteboard and it's as a coach would do, right? And just outlines every different function that you'd possibly need, how to run numbers, and just really love his story. And his book set us off too. Those are the first two that we read in the real estate realm that kind of painted the picture and helped us get to where we got.
Yeah, and to go back to Chad's book, because I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is a staple, and I would tell anybody to read that book. But the amount of times that I've heard people mention it's almost nauseating. So I don't want to I don't want to just say to read that book, because that is the number. That's like the foundation. That's where to start. But Retire Early with Real Estate, and Chad, hopefully he gets some more book sales from this. But he does case studies. So essentially, he takes, I think there was 20 or 30 case studies from people all over the United States. And we're talking about every single different market that you could imagine in the United States. And they have people relating their own stories to how they actually retired through real estate. And to know that it can be done anywhere and with people from all different socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds, it made me think, like, I'm going to give credit to these people, but I don't think they're smarter than me. Like, I can figure this out. And then that was the reason why we decided real estate's the way to go.
Yeah. And I will say there's probably a lot of people listening that they're just like turned off by books for whatever reason. They're like, hey, listen, I barely read in college. I barely read in high school. I'm not reading right now. Self-education is so vital if you do want to take yourself to the next level and take control of your financial future. You need to read, but you don't have to physically pick up a book and scan it and read it, right? Audible is amazing. And it's essentially an audio tape, right, for the book. And almost every big book has that now. And I think it's by Amazon. So You can download Audible. Podcasts are insane for resources. Obviously, we love podcasts. We're on them. We host one. And I would say, just peeling one layer back, is like another resource where you're going to hit a home run every time is Bigger Pockets, especially for real estate. They have an online forum where everyone engages, and they help build a community, and you can share resources depending on your market. And then they also have property analyzer tools, and they have a bunch of books that are published by their company. They created a publishing company, Bigger Pockets, and they have experts in each area that write the books. And we just went and read the books. And for me, I call it like my Bible. I have a bunch of these things that I carry around. I highlight, it's like my scripture, but I keep it so that way, if we have a question in our business, I'm like, hey, hold up, let me go back and go to the masters, and this is how they did it. And then we can formulate a plan. So we're big advocates for them. And we've come to know a lot of people in that community as well.
I completely back everything you guys said about Chad. I'm thankful to be able to call him a friend and be able to text with him from frequently and chat about all these different business concepts. He's been on the show, I don't even know now, 3-4 times. And funny enough, I haven't actually read his book, but I know I've watched a lot of his YouTube videos and chatted with him a lot. So I know a lot of the content that he puts out is.
We're like Chad's. He doesn't, I don't know if he knows this. We're like his mascots. Everywhere we go, we talk about him. And but we were just actually messaging him on Instagram the other day, because we were helping him grow his Instagram a little bit. And yeah, he's a great guy.
What's great about it, and what's interesting as a case study, is that Chad is probably really relatable to us three, because we're all athletes. And Chad's an athlete. So, I mean, Chad has great content, and he teaches everyday people who are not athletes to do great things in real estate, but just he really probably speaks to us three because of us being able to connect with him.
Yeah. And I think as like, I don't want to judge this each way. I'm not going to not be like sexist, but like as men, I think we are visual people, right? And like, I like to see things in front of me, written down, charts, graphs, etc. When Chad pops up the YouTube video and he has the whiteboard, right? It brings me back to my days where playing sports, right? And I'm like, all right, coach, here we go. What's the play we're running? And then he breaks it down with different color coordination and the markers. It's so basic, but you really feel like you're going back to school. But the way he talks about it, it's super relatable to us, and you want to engage. You're like, oh, all right, cool. Like if he did it, clearly I can do it too, because you feel like you're kind of cut from the same cloth. So.
Does anybody else love getting their day kicked off with a warm cup of quality coffee? Well, let me tell you guys about the coffee upgrade I recently made. Instead of rebuying the same old, let Trade Coffee send you something freshly roasted that you're literally guaranteed to love. Trade Coffee sells the freshest roasted and ethically sourced beans from America's best local roasters. They ship free to you as often as you'd like, whole or ground. Trade's real coffee experts taste test over 500 roasts, and their quiz matches you to your ideal coffee based on your taste preference and brewing method. They also guarantee you'll love your first bag, or they'll replace it for free.
Ryan, you also mentioned that a lot of people don't like books. And what I've found, both myself, but also from a lot of other people, is that they say that they were not readers in school or when they were younger. They didn't read in middle school or high school or even in college. They did everything they could to get out of reading. But now that they're not being forced to read, and they're able to choose what they read, and they're choosing about things to read about things that they're passionate about. They love reading and they'll happily do it. So, I mean, I'm sure there's still definitely people who don't like to read, but I think that there's a lot of people who prefer it in this case over what they had to do in school.
Completely agree. You can kind of, I don't know. It's hard to go back and tell an 18-year-old you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life right out of high school, right? And then some people pick a major. Some people don't go to school, right? Which is great. But some people pick a major that they think they're interested in. And then like year 3, when they're about to graduate the next year, they're like, whoa, I hated pretty much everything I read. I don't understand why I picked this major. And then you get into this big headspace where you're like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, what did I make a mistake? So I just think it's very hard for people to figure out what they want to do for their life, with the rest of their life at such a young age. And that's why a lot of people are like, damn, like, I don't want to read this book. I'm not interested in it, right? They think the major is something for them and like, it's not for me. But there's so many resources online, right? And it just goes back to self-education, right? If you find something that you're interested in, you can literally find that online today and dive into the deep rabbit hole of educating yourself on that topic. So I think it does come down to, money rules the world. Hate to say it. So you don't have to love it, but you have to get good at managing it and using it. And personal finance is not going anywhere. Like once you leave school or you get to a certain age, right, you're going to start to have to fend for yourself. And you don't want to wake up at 40, 50 and say, whoa, I never took this serious and I lost all this time and I have to play catch up now, because that's what a lot of people I think are doing now. I know millennials, like we feel like we have a lot on our plate because we do. Like we're fighting the 7% inflation, but also we're young. We want to go out and do stuff, but we're like, damn, like we've seen, whether it's our parents or people at the older generation, it's not cutting it. Whatever they did, it's not cutting it. So we're trying to pave the path at a younger age for our future generation. So it's a heavy weight, but I think it's something Cory and I really like pursuing and sharing as much knowledge as we can.
Not only do you have to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life at 18, but also the world is evolving so fast. I think back when the narrative was created that everybody has to go to college, the world wasn't evolving that fast. When you'd go to college 4 or 5 years later, the world was relatively the same as what it was when you entered. For us, and we're not even that old, we're all similar in age, but we're not that old. The world is so different now than it was when we went to college. Like I went through, got my MBA, and I don't do anything with that now. And I love what I chose. So I didn't go down a path that I didn't like. I love what I chose. But like, who knew that I'd host a podcast full time or invest in real estate? Like that just wasn't a thing when I went to college. So it's just totally opportunities outside of just liking what you choose at 18. There's opportunities that come up that you couldn't even expect. And Ryan, you also mentioned an interesting thing about personal finances. There's a lot of problems. I think JL Collins taught me this on the episode that he was on, but there's a lot of problems in life that if you just let them go long enough, they eventually go away. Like health and personal finance are a couple of the few things in life that will never go away. The problems just get worse and worse. Like he said to me, just deal with it now so that when you're 60, you don't have to, because if you don't deal with it now, it's just going to get harder and harder. And at 60, you're still going to have the problem. At 70, you're still going to have the problem. It never goes away. So it's one of those things that you just kind of, like you said, even if you don't like it, you have to get a control on it.
Robert, I think one of the goals of life is to do what you want to do when you want to do it and what you're passionate about, and make that something that you can do consistently, right? And you can do that, right? But if you are always thinking about money, it causes a time in your life where you're going to be desperate and you may not be able to make free, clear thinking decisions about you being able to do something that you love. You may have to make sacrifices to do something that you don't love. But if you put money at the beginning, and then you say, I'm going to try to build income streams that are coming in so that I have enough freedom in my time to be able to do whatever it is that I want to do, whenever it is that I want, then you can become an artist at 44. And it's not like somebody's going to look at you like, well, you're going to ruin your financial future if you're not successful, because you have already laid the groundwork to make your housing covered, your living expenses covered in the past, so that you can do whatever it is that you want, and not just at 65, Robert, but maybe at 30 or 25 or 40 or somewhere where you still have your mobility, capability to travel and do all the things that you want to do. So we just put it at the forefront and are saying, let's do this. Let's not get it out of the way, but I have a lot of passion projects that I want to work on that if I never thought about money and how it can work for me, then I would never be able to do it until I'm way too old to be able to make it happen.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just my personality, but I am type A, and I like things organized and efficient. So when I feel out of place somewhere where I feel like my things are all scattered around, it's not good for me. I like to feel like things are flowing right in the right direction. So I think a lot of people are genuinely like that, where they're like, listen, like my career is, I'm having fun, I like what I'm doing, but I might not be making enough. And it's kind of one of those things. Then you start like butting heads with like, damn, should I go pursue something else that pays me more, but I have less passion for? And that becomes a kind of like clash of the titans there. So for me, bringing it back to the whole point of me bringing this up is like systematizing your life and making it run efficiently will clear so much headspace and make you feel freer, right? You like to like clear body, mind, and just in having your freedoms back. So for me, like right now we're in the process of essentially like restructuring the business a little bit, working with a real estate attorney and CPA, just to get everything funneling and flowing in the right direction. And once that is like perfectly clear and in kind of in motion, I know that I'm like, good, we're done with that. We can move on to the next thing. When my personal finances, right? You have all your buckets flowing into each other. And once they do, you're just in a better headspace and you feel like you can go attack the next thing. I will say, you asked for resources again. One book that I think people should read to get their financial house in order is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I read that recently after I thought I had my financial house in order, which I, compared to most, I think I definitely did. But this helped me like sharpen the axe, if you will, right? And just like make it so streamlined that you can't really go wrong. It's a 6-week program in the book, but you can make it a little bit more efficient than that. Just want to make a point there. Go read the book, Ramit Sethi, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It's a game changer.
Funny enough, I actually didn't read that book for a long time solely because of the title. And it felt like a gimmicky book to me. And I didn't know much about Ramit at the time, but I was like, this title's gimmicky. I'm not wasting my time or money on this book. And then eventually I did. And like you said, Ryan, I really actually like the book. I think it's a great starting point for a lot of people. Now, there's a lot of people who get stuck in what I call the knowledge trap, where they just learn, and they never take action. And I think learning is super important. People need to do that, of course, but there's a point where you need to just not necessarily stop learning, but prioritize action more than more learning. So how did you guys do that? How did you know when you were ready to actually start taking action?
The short answer is we weren't. And I think that that's important to note, is that you're never going to be 100% ready. And if you try to wait until you are 100% ready, you will take it directly to the grave, because you won't be. So what I have like a little bit of a blueprint that I think I could share with people that would give you an idea. Depends how many days a week that you're thinking about actually taking the knowledge. But if you do 6 to 12 months, because you got to learn, especially if we're talking about real estate, 6 to 12 months, and you just learn everything that there is to know. We just gave you a bunch of resources to do so. Our podcast, we'd like to think, is an authentic version of our own journey and a resource that people could latch onto to learn. So 6 to 12 months of learning. Okay. And then once you hit that 12 months point, it kind of gets to a point of diminishing returns where it's like, you may learn some new things along the way, but it may not help you enough. Taking action would actually be better. So then it's the action phase. You take action, and then while you do this, you learn so many things through your experiences. Then you pivot. So action, taking this action, and then you pivot along the way. And I can throw an example out there just in my life. I was pretty ready to buy my first duplex, but not 100%. I did it. I made the move. And it turns out I didn't realize that, you're supposed to fix up these properties when you buy them. And I didn't put any money in. So for the first year, it was a complete money pit. But in doing that, I broke even in cash flow. So I thought, I'm supposed to be making X amount of money. I broke even in cash flow. Then the following year, after I made all these fixes, I made about $450 a month in cash flow. Good. That's a win. That's a pivot. Now I know next time when we buy a property, we're going to do all the fixes up front. I wouldn't have known that in the beginning. And in doing that, my property has appreciated $70,000. So now I have this equity in the property that I can figure out what I want to do with it and how I want to play that game. So learning, taking the action, making that actual mistake, by learning the mistake the hard way, as long as you can sustain it through having enough income coming in to support it, learning the mistake, pivoting, and then going and taking further action. I would say that is how we created a system to just can't be afraid to fail, because failure will then create your next success.
Yeah. The most important thing I think for us is, or not the most important thing, but one of the important things is like when we interview people on our show, it's to hear unique stories of people that have done it before us successfully. And that, in the hopes that someone that's listening says, whoa, I can relate to that story. We bring on all walks of life. I don't care what you look like, what age you are, what you've done in the past. You're sharing your story and you've seen success. So someone is going to say, hey, like, she looks like me. He looks like me. We're from the same area. Latch onto that story, and potentially you can learn from their systems that they put in place and their strategies that they've implemented. For us, let's just say, call it like it is. We latched on to Coach Carson. We were like, damn, he's an athlete. He's literally writing it out for us and teaching it the way we want to interpret information. And once we felt like we had 80%, 75, 80% of the knowledge, you're like, dude, we just got to do this thing, right? Like, I think there's a quote that I love is life begins outside your comfort zone, right? So you're going to get in this wheelhouse where you're comfortable reading and researching and you're going to get a ton of knowledge, and you keep getting that cycle, and you're in the analysis paralysis phase, right? You've analyzed hundreds of properties and you're like, oh, maybe once the next one's done, once I'll feel comfortable. Oh, this one only cash flows a little bit, so I'm not going to take any action. The average person that makes, I think, about between 10 to 20 offers before they get a property even accepted, right? And to move to the next stage. So what I would recommend is do your research for about 12 months, right? And you're going to find a story and a strategy that resonates with you. And then jump into that lane and dive further into that rabbit hole of saying like, okay, buy and hold seems good to me. Long-term buy and hold. I'm going to go that route. Then you got to pick your property type, right? I want to go single family? Should I go into small multi? Maybe I want to do the duplex and do a house hack. But for us, it took to hear a story that we resonated with. And then we, went like bats out of hell and did as much as we possibly could. But one day we looked at each other and we're like, dude, we just got to go. Let's just make an offer. I don't know. Like, we feel pretty much ready, but there is no actual time that you're going to feel 100% ready. You have to take that leap of faith, and you're going to learn, as Cory said, through the experiences. I think that's with anything in life, but especially with investing in your financial future.
I talk a lot about how house hacking is kind of like becoming a real estate investor or a landlord with training wheels, or doing a light version of it. So what has house hacking taught you guys that you were able to leverage into investing in traditional rentals?
Well, you're right about that, Robert. It was like a training wheels addition to it. I think the number one thing that it did for us was allow us to gain personal cash flow in our lives. So the monetary value was the biggest help there, where instead of spending $1,000 a month on rent, I was actually able to save that money and save it up and then move it into the next investment. So monetarily is the biggest thing. And then also understanding the relationships that you create with tenants. The tenants that I had, essentially, they happen to be my friends, but I had to make a distinction between what was friend and what was, oh no, this rent is due on this date, and if it's not given or you don't pay it, there are action steps to take. So I think really the biggest thing was the framework that it laid for, okay, I collect rent. What are my systems that I can put in place in a simple manner that will then translate into real estate investing at a distance, or, scaling a portfolio?
Yeah. And I would say you're going through the process of buying a property, right? So it starts at the bare bones of building your team, right? You got to find a real estate agent, and then hope that that person is savvy enough to go out and help you find the right property, right? And then you can use their resources to find a lender, to find a contractor, to find everyone that's, insurance, everyone on your team. You go through that process. Say this is your first time, right? Getting into real estate. It truly is investing on training wheels. The only thing that would probably be a little different is for us, it was having friends live with us, right? You're not like outsourcing and screening tenants, right? That was the next phase for us, where we're like, when we bought our other investment property, it's like, okay, now we really got to go through the tenant screening phase and find someone that we want in there, run background checks and do the whole nine. But it truly is, like you said, taking the action, and you're going through the experience. You're learning how to buy a property. You're learning how to manage a property, collect rent, all that. And then you can say, okay, what systems do I need still that are not in place for my next one? And then it just helps you kind of move along in the process of just becoming a seasoned investor.
There seems to be a misconception that you can't invest in rental properties if you're house hacking. You house hack for a while and then you get into rental properties. They're not done at the same time. They're kind of steps. And I think you guys and myself would agree that you can buy rentals while you house hack. I've house hacked 3 times and I continue to buy rentals, and I'm going to continue to personally house hack probably for a while. What do you guys think about house hacking in terms of a timeline for you? You're going to keep house hacking? When are you going to stop?
It's a good question, but the key word that you said was you can't. And I think that as becoming a more seasoned investor, the question has become how for us. Like, how can we make this happen? Because we've interviewed investors on our show that their first investment was a 50-unit complex. And we're like, whoa. For us, we're like, how did you even go into thinking? Most investors go house hack, single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex, and then they work their way into commercial. But it really is everyone's risk tolerance and what they're willing to kind of I guess risk and go out there and who they're going to meet and who they're going to network with. So the timeline for us would be whatever you're comfortable with, but we just think house hacking was the first staple in it. And now our timeline kind of went like house hacking into small multifamily that is technically out of state, but it's pretty close to us, like an hour away. And now our next phase is real estate investing at a distance across the country in better markets that make better margins and more sense for us with people that we really trust. So I'm not sure if I totally answered the question there.
Do you have a specific point of when you're going to be done house hacking? Like, are you going to hit a certain cash flow number? Are you going to hit a certain age, certain number of units when you're going to be like, okay, I'm done house hacking? For me, it's maybe not a hard rule. It might change, but I think right now, like roughly around 30. I just turned 27 last week. So when I hit 30, I think that'll probably be the last time I house hack, but it might not be, but that's kind of like what I'm looking at for a timeline.
I think predicting that is difficult to do because life continuously changes for us. So Rye wasn't house hacking, but I decided to mainly because he's married and I'm single. So I think that was one of the steps that was easier to do that, easier to be like, oh, I'll live with people that I know, friends, or even people that I don't know. So for me, I think that I could probably continue to house hack for another 3 to 4 years if I wanted to. What I may end up doing, instead of buying a single family home again and living in one bedroom and renting out other bedrooms that I'm in close quarters with people, is potentially buying a duplex or a triplex and living in one of the units where I have more secluded, your own space. And then you don't have, you may be sharing a wall with people, but you're not sharing a dishwasher with somebody. So I can do that for the foreseeable future. And even if you were raising a family, having multifamily where you live in one unit and rent out the other, it's a small sacrifice for a lot of financial gain. But I don't know that there's a specific age where I would say I wouldn't do this anymore, because you can buy a new construction duplex. For example, we live in Philadelphia. You can buy a new construction duplex for $450,000 or $500,000, and we're talking really nice in the path of progress, and have a 2-bed, 1-bath that's 1,000 square feet and beautiful, and then that's going to be worth so much more in a number of years, and you still have your own space. So kind of up in the air, I would say.
What you described with that duplex is almost exactly what I'm doing. I'm not married, but I do have a son. He's 3.5, and he and I live in a duplex that's a 2x1 with like 12 or 1,300 square feet, and it's pretty nice. And I pay like $500 a month because my tenants pay like 80-90% of the mortgage, and it's great. And so for me, I could continue to do this for a long time. But for me, I've kind of more set the limitation of 30 to kind of motivate myself. But if I still want to at 31, 32, 33, I certainly could.
Totally.
I think what else is interesting when we talk about real estate deals is that everybody has different goals and opinions on what a good deal is. So when you guys are analyzing a potential deal, what are your benchmarks and requirements, and what are you guys looking at?
Yeah, you want me to go on this one?
Yeah, you ready to go? You're our numbers guy.
Okay. So originally when we got into real estate investing, there was a number of different people that told you like $100 a month in cash flow was what to look for. The problem with that is if you have a furnace go for $3,000, your $100 a month in cash flow is then lost for potentially 3 years. So we figured, what's a good deal to us? What makes the most sense? We basically say that singles, we'll call it singles, $250 a month in cash flow. That would be our bare minimum per door that we would go after. Singles are great. You can hit them all day. You can stack them and they compound into more. Then you get into the doubles range where you're talking about $350 to $400 a month in cash flow. They're great too. Obviously, if you go up from there, grand slam, anything is really $700, $800 above in cash flow. So we try to hit as many, doubles, triples, and home runs or grand slams as you can, but $250 a month is our minimum. We've been fortunate enough to get properties that are around the $500 or $600 a month in cash flow number. And to get to that number, we're essentially just taking the rents and we're subtracting out PITI, which is principal, insurance, taxes, and then principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and then you're taking your expenses. So we run all our numbers with property management at 10% included, vacancy at about 5%. We take about 10 to 15% for maintenance. I didn't mention that. And then obviously any utilities that may be paid by the owner, lawn care, snow removal, water bills that can't be separately metered. We take all of that. And as long as that we're coming in and around $250 above, we're at least looking at the deal. So we don't necessarily like to go off the 1% rule, which is, if you're buying a property for $100,000, do you bring in $1,000 a month in rent? Just based on the fact that it's all market dependent. And in our area, that wouldn't work, but that doesn't mean there's not good deals to be found.
Yeah. And it also comes down to cash on cash return, right? Like the amount of money that we have to fork up for a deal. Is it going to bring us the return that we're looking for, especially in cash flow? Like 250 is the bare minimum for us to look at it. Like we're looking for stuff in the $400, $450 range, because think about it. We're splitting it at the end of the day. Like that would be 200 for me, 200 for Cory. And we're like, okay, we're good with that. Granted, it's all funneled through the business, but there's just kind of how our brains work on it. And it's also an area that we think is going to appreciate. Maybe we'll take 250 for something that we're like, hey, we know this is going to go up, or we really foresee this going up in the future to get a ton of equity in the property. That would be something we'd be looking at more so than something in an area that pretty much is in a stalemate that isn't going to go up or hasn't gone up that much. And that would be where we would take probably the 450, right? So it is deal dependent, market dependent. And there's so many other avenues outside of real estate where you can funnel your cash. So it's just finding that balance of like, okay, like, do we want to drop $20,000 in this one specific property each, or do we want to dump it into something else?
Not to say that $250 a month per door is the right benchmark, but that's also my benchmark as well. Just kind of so happens that that's what I look for. I think the people that are looking at $100 a month is kind of crazy, just because I actually just got a bill in the mail yesterday for the taxes at one of my properties going up, and it went up by like $50 a month or so, 30 or 40, $50 a month. And over the last 2-3 years, I think it's gone up like 80 total per month. And if you were only making $100 a month in cash flow, those taxes just going up over the last couple of years, I mean, you're wiped out. I mean, in theory, you could raise rents, right? Ideally, the goal there would be to raise rents more than the taxes are going up. But if that's not possible, if you have a long-term tenant who's a great tenant, you might not raise rents on them. And then, I mean, there you go. Your whole profit is wiped out. And then the other piece you mentioned is cash on cash. I think that is the other really important piece, because what if you put up $1 million and you're only getting $250 a month in profit? I mean, that's not great, right? But if you put in $5,000 a month and you're making you put in $5,000 total and you're getting $250 a month, now that's a great deal. So it is really dependent on that cash on cash as well.
Yeah, exactly, Robert. And that's why the strategy that you use, like the BRRRR strategy, can be so effective, because you can essentially get infinite cash on cash return if you're playing the game properly. And, just throwing an example out there, buying a $100,000 property with 20% down, and then you're putting in $50,000. So you're all in your cash is maybe 70 grand, but you're all in the property for 150. It appraises for 250. You can pull your money back out, even that you invested in the beginning. And then any cash flow that you bring in from your rental properties, from the rents, could be infinite cash on cash return. Those are harder to do now. It's more difficult to do that in 2022, but it's still possible depending upon your network. So cash on cash is a very big number, although we don't have a 100% specific, this is the cash on cash return number that we need, because there are so many varying factors that may play into a good deal. And we may say, you know what, this is a little bit less cash on cash, but we're playing the balance between the appreciation and the cash flow. And we think that if we do that enough, we throw our hat in the ring enough times on that, some properties are going to work, some properties aren't. But if you have 8 out of 10 of them that are doing what you suggest that they're supposed to do based off the spreadsheets, you're going to be in a pretty good place.
Typically, as you mentioned, the appreciation is going to work against your cash flow. If you have a higher appreciating property, you're probably going to have a little bit less cash flow. If you have more cash flow, it's probably not going to appreciate. It's not a hard and fast rule, but general rule of thumb, that typically is the relationship between the two. When you guys started to get into traditional rentals, what type of properties did you target? Were you looking at single family, duplexes, triplexes, commercial? And why did you pick that asset class?
Our goal was to go into small multifamily because we understood it, and we wanted to go into a market that also played into the growth of small multifamily within that market. So that was the whole goal, because small multifamily really plays in that cash flow game. Single family homes are not meant specifically for cash flow. Like, they're not designed to bring in cash flow, because you don't read them as a business. They're more so like a home or where a family lives. But multi-unit apartments, where if you get even to the 4, 5, 6, 7 and bigger, they're designed and they're purchased based on the income that they bring in. So we thought, let's play in the small game, right? Because you can do residential loans if the property is 4 units and below. So let's play in the 2, 3, and 4 unit area to try to get our feet wet and understand the game before then we move on to larger acquisitions in the commercial space. So small multifamily in markets that are probably B minus areas that may have some appreciation value that but will also continue to cash flow.
What have you guys struggled with so far on your real estate journey, and what mistakes have you made? What did you learn from those struggles and mistakes that you're applying to your future investing endeavors?
What have we not struggled with?
Yeah, I think the whole thing is, you fail often, fail forward, and fail fast. I might have messed up the order on those, but you learn through failure, right? And so I'll just say a struggle for us has been now where we're currently at is we're getting thrown deals and business opportunities in a bunch of different sectors, if you will. And it's where are we?
Shiny object syndrome. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, where are we going to get the most return? What's going to be sustainable for the longest amount of time? And then it's like, what lane should we pick at the moment? And we kind of have to keep recentering ourselves to say, hey, listen, we said we are all about cash flow right now. We want to get to that 60,000 mark each per year to cover all of our expenses. And then we can go for maybe a different like appreciation play. So it's exactly what Cory said, is that shiny object syndrome. It's like, hey, I want you to, here's an automation system where you can invest in my online business, or, hey, I have a potential syndication deal. You just have to give us $50K and we'll give you X amount of cash flow. And then you're in the apartment building kind of field. Or here, come invest with us over in Cleveland. Come invest with us in Utah. Like, just a lot of different places. It's like, what you have to find your niche and build your buy box. And I think that's the most important thing. It's like, find your cash flow number that you're looking for, find the market that you want to be in. And that's one of the best pieces of advice we've gotten recently is like, pick your market and stick to it for X amount of time, right? You're going to have people reaching out to you, trying to pull you in every different direction, but find where you feel comfortable and where you want your business to land, and just keep hammering it over and over and over and build your base there. And then eventually once you're sustained, you can build out and go into a different field.
And to add on to that, we interviewed Matt Faircloth on our show recently, and he's brilliant in terms of private money lending, and he has over 2,000 units himself, his company. And he says, I have over 2,000 units and I invest in 3 markets in the United States. I won't even look if they're outside of those markets. So once you understand your niche and where you specifically want to invest, where your team is, where your network is, where you can really grow, he has 2,000 units in 3 markets. I mean, it's not like he's looking all over the place and trying to find the next deal, the next thing that just pops up. And honestly, that's been a struggle for us, because we've had opportunities that have come our way that we've had to say no to. And to be candid, some of them we'd said yes to, and we didn't think that we were going to say yes to them. We're trying to build a number of different income streams. So we just have to kind of say, if we're going to spend 80% of our time on this niche, it's okay to deviate. We're not saying that you have to be super rigid, because we haven't been, but for the most part, we know where we want to end up, and hopefully all these puzzle pieces fit together to help us get there.
Yeah, it's hard because you want to try things, right? So we talk about we're long-term buy and hold guys, but we had an opportunity to buy a property and renovate it and then rent it out at the end. And we went through this whole renovation. It took like 4 to 5 months that we weren't really expecting. It was almost a DIY kind of project where we were like managing the contractors or at the property every other weekend. And we were exhausted after. I'm like, dude, we don't want to do that again, for at least for the foreseeable future, unless it's a home run deal, which honestly this one was. So we're very thankful for it. But we've been pulled in the directions again. Like I said, hey, do you want to jump in on this flip? Do you want to do this? And like, it really is, you have to kind of be careful with the cash you have and make sure you're deploying it in the right thing. And I think it's nice that we have a partnership, right? Because we can bounce ideas back and forth. One of us might want to be gung ho all the way on this. And then you have devil's advocate next to you saying, hey, let's bump the brakes. Here's our goals for the year. Does this fall in line with X, Y, and Z? So I think that's super important to have an accountability partner that will kind of keep you in line. But I also want to say, when I talked about like being efficient, right, and having your business kind of rolling in the right direction, another hiccup that people kind of get hit with is, hey, should I open an LLC? Should I buy under my personal name? And how do I form my business? And people thinking they have to start with an LLC holds them back from ever taking action, right? So I want to remove the stigma there. You can buy in your own name and then you can transfer over to an LLC later. Probably 1% of all of these will have the due on sale clause where the lender says, hey, you want to transfer this over? We're going to have your whole loan due at the time. A, if that happens, you can refinance, or B, you can say, hey, listen, like, just kidding. I'm not going to dump it into the LLC. I'll keep it for now and just buy yourself more time. That was a little side note, but for me, we've recently come to conclusion that, hey, like, our business might not be structured the most optimal for tax purposes, right? And to be able to experience certain write-offs. So we're going through the process now of working with a new CPA and real estate attorney to have our business structure streamlined. And so everything can flow into the right buckets. And I think that just comes with time, right? To answer your question, there's so many different hurdles every day. And like we've struggled with a lot of different things, right? But the only way you're going to get really good at it is to go through the struggle. You're not going to hit a home run on every aspect of your business without having some failures and going through and pivoting, right? We've certainly pivoted a lot over the last couple of years. So.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, I was a guest on your guys' show twice now. So you've had the chance to ask me a bunch of questions. So if anybody wants to hear more questions that Ryan and Cory asked me, you guys can go check out that episode. But as longtime listeners of the show know, I like to wrap up the show by having the guest ask me a question. So Cory, Ryan, what question do you guys have for me?
I got one for you. So if we gave you a lump sum of $50,000 today, just saying, hey, Robert, you can have this $50K, do what you want with it, whether you're investing it or spending it, how would you break up or divvy up that pie of $50K and why?
I would probably put some into an RV rental and real estate.
Love it.
Why would you pick the RV rental and real estate, and what type of real estate would you put it in?
Real estate, I would probably you guys talked a lot about knowing what you're good at, following, your box of what you can do. And I have a really good system for buying my single family rental properties in Texas. So I'd probably just buy 2-3 more of those. And then also I would buy an RV. And the reason I would do the real estate is because it's every benefit that you have of real estate that we've talked about, we get the cash flow, a little bit more appreciation. It's a little bit safer of an asset class, not as much of a kind of speculation. Whereas the RV rental, it's going to be a lot more cash flow. It's going to generate probably the most instant cash flow that I could generate with that money, but it is maybe a little bit more trendy, maybe a little bit more speculative, maybe not as long-term. You're definitely not going to get any appreciation. So I would be able to split that money to get kind of the benefits of real estate, but also generate significant cash flow in the short term.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and to go off that though, Robert, I was just thinking you kind of reminded me, like, in keeping yourself in that lane, you know what you're really good at, right? So like we're talking about buying a short-term rental, and that's something that we're probably going to add to this lane here. But the reason that we love long-term buy and hold and that we know we're really good at it is because if you get into the short-term rental space, similar kind of the RV space, that if you can't rent it out short-term for whatever reason, there aren't 4, 5, 6, 7 fallback options that you have like you do in long-term investing, where you can sell the property, you can refinance. I mean, you can do some of these things, but just knowing your lane, that's why I like that answer, because you're getting really good at the RV rental stuff. And we have a show or our episode dedicated towards that. But yeah, I thought that was a good answer.
Guys, I appreciate you joining me on the show. For anybody that's listening, wants to connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
Sure. You can find us all over social. Our main hub is Instagram. So our handle is @weeklyjuicepod, just for the Weekly Juice Podcast. And then also you can find us, our podcast name, as I just said, is the Weekly Juice Podcast. You can find us anywhere podcasts are found, Apple, Spotify, etc. And our episodes released every Wednesday.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put a link to those resources in the show notes for anybody that's interested in checking them out. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Robert. It was a pleasure.
Love it, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next podcast episode and new investing resources. What are your takeaways and thoughts about this discussion? Let us know in the comments section below.